Good morning. So, while you're sort of still discussing what you wanted the next topic to be, so I had a thought, and this is a fascinating topic, which actually it's a bit of a crossover to some extent between halacha and hashkafa, in the sense that, of course, and this is itself a topic, the interplay between halacha and hashkafa, but this is a topic which I hope in your rabbinical careers you will not come across. I have actually come across an aspect of it, but it's both timely in terms of its connection to Purim and Esther, and it's a fascinating topic in halacha, and it is as follows. The topic is Giloy Aroyos Lahatzil Yisrael. What are the parameters of a woman? Let's talk about a married woman. What are the parameters? Is there any heter whatsoever that she can betray her husband and be intimate with somebody other than her husband, but for the purposes of Hatzalah, for the purposes of saving Klal Yisrael? Or, and I use the word Klal Yisrael very broadly, because we are going to discover at least three opinions in the Gedolei HaAchronim about this. Let me give you the most, I want to, because we're videoing this, will go up on YouTube, so I don't want to be too indelicate. But I have no clue whether Mossad, whether Shabak consults rabbinical authority before they do missions or not. They certainly should. But it's well documented that they have used the so-called honey trap for their purposes. The Mordechai Vanunu story he was lured, he was accused of selling out Israel in terms of nuclear secrets of what was going on in Dimona, and he was seduced by a married Shabak agent. She was an Eishes Ish, and Israel deemed it important that they lured him, got him back to face justice, and it was in London, and she told him she would go with him to an apartment that her sister had in Rome. The details, the sordid details, certainly do not interest us, nor should they. But there's a concept here, and in uncovering and discovering it, and there are more. It's often tragic. But, I mean, the tragic side of it, which we will discover, is a number of tshuvas in the Achronim, and it goes right down to the Holocaust. And that would be if a woman has the opportunity, if that's the right word indeed, or being coerced to be intimate with somebody other than her husband, but for the purposes of saving herself, others, family, community, etc. Is there any halachic leeway at all? We know, of course, that Giloy Aroyos, so an Eishes Ish, a married woman, it's one of those three cardinal halachas that Yehoreg Val Yavor. You must let yourself be killed rather than transgress. That we know, and we'll talk a little bit at some point about the Makoros for this, because it's going to make a difference. But is there any leeway at all? That's really the shaila, and it can have. Let me go to a. This is one aspect of it. There's another aspect of it which we're going to uncover, and which can happen. There is a halacha. Let me mention this because it's important to know. V'nitma'a by soita. We learned the pasuk says v'nitma'a, v'nitma'a. We actually spoke about this, if you recall, in the previous set of shiurim, right? About hein ede yichud, hein ede bia, remember? There is a halacha echad lebal, v'echad lebayil, v'echad letruma. This word v'nitma is repeated 3 times, and it tells us that from the moment that a woman is an Eishes Ish, a married woman, is intimate with somebody else, is fully intimate with somebody else, yes, she is now forbidden to her husband. She's osur min haTorah. She can no longer be intimate with her husband. She is also osur laboyel, to the person whom she betrayed her husband with. The shailas which can and potentially do happen, would be a woman who was married, had an affair, chas v'shalom, with somebody, divorces her husband, and now wants to marry this person. This happens not once, and sadly these things can and do happen. And this will be a corollary to some extent. You with me? Okay. Having kind of set the scene a little bit, let's learn a bit of Torah. And we dive straight into Megillas Esther. And she says, Perek Daled, Pasuk Tezayin, Leich knoises kol ha-Yehudim anim tzuim b'Shushan v'tzumu alai v'al toichlu v'al tishtu shleishes yomim v'layla v'yoyim gam ani v'naris hayotzim kein uvechein avoyel ha-melech asher lo chados v'chasher ovadeti. And es ist eine Trauerrede. Tragisch, ja, genau. It's a Trauerrede. It's done in the Eicha tune. Uvechein avoyel ha-melech, and thus reluctantly I will go to the king. Asher lo chados. Now, asher lo chados means it is illegal. The question is, which system of jurisprudence is being referred to here? Is it asher lo chados on the basis of Persian royal protocol? And indeed, we know it is, because the Masa Matan, the confrontation, the dialogue that she has with Mordechai is Kol Ish v'Isha. Everybody knows that if you go into the king, Asher lo yikare achas dasei lahamis. So, at a simple level, of course, that is being referred to. But is there something more being referred to? Is there another das being referred to? V'daseihem shoynos mikolam. And it's interesting, that word das, meaning religion or set of rules or regulations or protocols, features a number of times in Megillas Esther. I'm not giving a drush here, but if you think about it, it has a very interesting pride of place for some interesting reason. But is this a double entendre? Is there another layer of meaning? Zog the Heilige Gemara, Quelle 2. Gemara Megillah Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph. Asher lo chados, Omer Rabbi Abba, shelo kedas hoya. It was shelo kedas, meaning al pi halacha. She is now doing something which is osor, which is shelo kados. Says the Gemara, shebechol yom v'yom ad achshav. Every intimate encounter that Esther had had with Achashverosh until this moment in time, ba'oinus, she was coerced, compelled. She had no choice. She didn't want.
We also didn't subas this oilam.
Very good, indeed.
We learned this back then.
Great. So then it'll go much quicker. The Tosfos will go very quickly. Awesome.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well done. Daf Gimel Amud Beis. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So ad achshav, it was ba'oinus. V'achshav b'rotzain. But now she is going to make herself available. And the expectation, the context is not only to go and say, hi, how are you, but to make herself available for intimacy. V'achshav b'rotzain. And therefore, v'chasher avadati, kashem she'avadati mi beis Abba. Just as I am going to be lost from my father's household, we'll leave what that means. Kach oived mimcha. I will be lost to you, my dear husband, Mordechai. Zokt Rashi, Quelle 3. Says Rashi, Ad achshav niv'alti ba'oinus, va'achshav mikan va'elech midati. I know what I am doing. I am making myself available for the purposes of intimacy to Achashverosh, and I am being proactive. I'm preempting this. I'm doing this. Therefore, avadati mimcha va'asura ani loch, says Rashi. I am therefore going to be forbidden to you, my dear husband. Goodbye. I'm no longer going to be able to be intimate with you anymore. De'eshes Yisrael shenensa muteres lebala uberotza in asura lebala. Says Rashi. This is Rashi in Maseches Megillah. I'm just going to point something out. You can put it into your notes. Read Rashi, learn Rashi on the Megillah, in Megillas Esther, and there's your house Aufgabe, if you get a chance, your homework. Have have a look at Rashi on this posuk in Maseches Megillah and compare. Do a side-by-side comparison of these Rashis. I'm not going to go into it. But Eishes Yisrael Shenen Samuteres Labala. The halacha is what would be chas v'shalom if a married woman, I should add, a non-kohen, right? Kohen is different. But if an Eishes Yisrael chas v'shalom is raped, is coerced, is violated, muteres lebala. It does not affect, because the element of rotzain is missing, absent motive, absent kavana, wanting to betray her husband, wanting to be unfaithful, then v'lanaro loisasedova. That's where we learn it from. Ein lanaro chet mishpat moves, because she's an onus. However, uberotzain asura lebala. So Rashi explains the Gemara. She is, for the sake of Klal Yisrael, she's doing two things here. She's going, and I'm saying this, remember this, and you can pick me up on this. She seems to be doing an Aveira for a good reason. And I'm putting a big question mark on this. We'll see. She is going to be intimate with Achashverosh willingly, and therefore asura lebala. But maybe that is what was the right thing to do. Okay? Let's have a look. Says the Gemara. Now, really, for the purposes of our discussion here, the locus classicus is the Gemara in Sanhedrin, where the Gemara is discussing the halachas of the chiyuv v'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. There is a chiyuv of Kiddush Hashem, right? So all mitzvahs, I'll give you the context. All mitzvahs, other than the Gimel Averis Chamurais, if somebody comes and says to you, I will force you to eat this Big Mac, this Schweinfleisch, whatever it is, otherwise I'll blow your brains out, you'll say, pass the mustard. Actually, that's an interesting shaila whether you're allowed to pass the mustard. Zilberstein has an interesting, but that's are you allowed to be? But you can eat it. Not only it would be a mitzvah to eat it. You have to eat it. That is only two points. That is only if it is not when it is done at a time of shmad, when it's a time when there is a very clear zeitgeist. They're trying to get us not to keep Yiddishkeit. And there's a difference between Yochid and Barabim, B'farhesia. If it is in front of 10 Yidden, then there's a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. Asks the Gemara, that's the background. Asks the Gemara of Kamo Parhesia, how much is considered Parhesia to be in public, where the chiyuv of an Nikdashti B'soich B'nei Yisrael would kick in. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Ein Parhesia Pchusa Me'asora B'nei Adam. 10. Pshita. Says the Gemara, of course, Yisraelim be'inon. Of course, obviously, you're going to need 10 Jews, as it says, v'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. And this is a separate topic where we learn it from. We learn it from people that are not such tzaddikim, but that's not the point. Boy Rabbi Yirmiyah. Tisha Yisrael v'nochri echad mahu. What would be if there were 9 Yisraelim and 1 Gentile? Toshma, Tani Rabbi Yana, Echud Rabbi Chia, Baraba, Asya Toich. There's a Gzeir Shava, Ksiv Hochav Nikdashti B'soich B'nei Yisrael, Ksiv Hosam Behi Bodle Mitoichai Dazois Malah Lan Asara V'Kulu Yisrael, Afkan Asara V'Kulu Yisrael. Fine. Asks the Gemara a question. V'ho Esther Parhesia Havoi. But the story of Esther was public. So what's the Gemara's question? Look immediately, Rashi, Kvela 5. V'ho Esther Parhesia Havoi, says Rashi, v'nivalo l'nochri, v'loi mosro nafsho liktola. She was... the Gemara doesn't ask that. Okay. That doesn't seem to be... Okay. That doesn't seem to... I'm not sure that it was. It actually wasn't. How? Lasses kirtzai nish va'ish. You could do whatever you want then. There was no suggestion that it was a shas shmad. But...
He wanted to destroy the Jewish people.
Afterwards. That's not... No, shmad, it means when you want us to stop keeping Yiddishkeit.
So it's not about the physical...
The pashtus not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not the focus of the sugya. Good point, but that's not... Yeah. Says Rashi, Esther was Parhesia, v'nival al-nochri, and she went along to go with Achashverosh, v'lo mosra nafsha l'ktola. She should have allowed herself to be killed. Question mark. Is the Gemara asking on the first time she went to Achashverosh or the second time? Is it the first time when she went to be with him, or is it the second time? Question mark. But the question is, why did she not just allow herself to be killed? It is parhesia. And here we have two answers in the Gemara. A machlekas Abaya and Rava. And it will be very instructive how we paskin. Whether we paskin like one or the other, or potentially both, as we shall see. Okay? So the Gemara asked about Esther, parhesia hava. Omar Abaya, Esther, karka oilam hoisan. This is what you are referring to from your memory of the Gemara in Ksubas. Very well done. So Abaya says, Esther was karka oilam. Now, what does that mean? Karka oilam, says Rashi, eino oiso ma'aseh. Hu oise bo ma'aseh. The nature of the intimate act is thus, and I have to use my words quite carefully, because there's... again, for your notes, remember we will get to an Igros Moshe and a Sridei Eish. Really interesting Sridei Eish about this as well. But the nature of the act of intimacy is such that her participation, her active participation, is not required for the act to take place and to be consummated. It is irrelevant. She literally just needs to be there. That's it. She just needs to be physically there. That's it. She is utterly passive. Says Rashi, Eina oisa ma'isa. Rashi says two things. Eina oisa ma'isa, hu oisa bo ma'aseh. Why Rashi has both. Not a yeshiva shalom de Shiur, but so she is, it's clear. She is passive. She is not active. And therefore, the chiyuv of V'nigdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael of chilul Hashem and kiddush Hashem, where you have a chiyuv to allow yourself to be killed, is not valid, is not a chiyuv at a point where you're not doing anything. You can't say, I've done a chilul Hashem. And this, by the way, it's problematic at a number of different levels, even before we go any further. Even before we get to the Tosfos, which is really what I want to do with you, but I can't hold myself back from making the following observation. Abaya's answer suggests to us an incredibly important idea in the notion of the chiyuv, of the mitzvah of kiddush Hashem and chilul Hashem. What do I mean by that? Chilul Hashem and kiddush Hashem, number one, is... We see from the Gemara in Yuma Peivav, in the Rambam in Perek Aleph Hilchos Tshuva, we see that in the so-called in the Daled Chiluke Kapara, right? If a person does an Aveira, the severity of the punishment for different types of Aveiras gives us an indication of the hierarchy, right? Very clear. Yoshav Adam v'lo yasa mitzvah. If a person was passive and he just didn't do a mitzvah, he just didn't put on tefillin, you do tshuva and that's it. If you're over a lo saseh, then you get malchus. It's worse to be actively over something than to be passively over something, right? And then there's something, a lo saseh, which has a kores. So there is teshuva, there is Yom Kippurim, there is Yisurim, and then at the end, the Gemara and this Paskin in Rambam is that if there is chilul Hashem, if as a result of what you have done, irrespective of the technical severity of the infraction, of the Isser itself, if a chilul Hashem results and emanates, Misa, only death. Only death. What's the pshat? Very simple. Shakol bara lechvoidai. The entire purpose of creation is that each of us, individually and collectively, will act as ambassadors for giloi kvoidai, to reveal that there is a Borei Olam, etc. And if what you do produces the opposite result, then you've just written yourself out of the script. You clearly have no place in Hashem's world. It's as simple as that.
It seems like the thing that goes against this kavod must be your own, yet like your agenda. As soon as it's visible that it's your agenda to do this, then it's the highest step.
I'm going to say the exact opposite, and I'll tell you why. But I first want
From what I
to.
heard,
Okay, I'll say it again. I haven't.
the highest step of Chilul Hashem must be that it's not like there is no that in the person who does it, there is no doubt that it's like.
Where are you getting this from? What is your?
I just try to understand what you just said.
No, so I didn't. So then, I actually said almost the opposite, and I'm sorry, I probably wasn't very clear.
Okay.
What I said was that if a Chilul Hashem results from what you have done, irrespective of the technical nature of the infraction, whatever the Aveira is, even if it's if I didn't put on tefillin, and as a result of not putting on tefillin, a massive Chilul Hashem emanates, then the technical aspect of not performing a positive mitzvah, which in and of itself technically is the lowest form of problem, but the Chilul Hashem aspect of it can still absolutely can be active and can require Misa.
But we still haven't defined the Chilul Hashem aspect, though.
That's a good point.
Right.
Chilul Hashem needs a definition,
Right.
and I'm coming to that.
Right.
I would say,
Okay.
I'm coming to that. What is Chilul Hashem? And here is where we get into some incredibly strange and very, very important territory. The Gemara asks the question, but let me make that point. It's the Chilul Hashem that is. I'm using my words very carefully. I'm speaking slowly because Chilul Hashem is. It's almost certain that Chilul Hashem is dependent less on the motive of the actor and much more on the outcome and consequence and the perception that is created, provided it is a legitimate perception.
So it's an arbitrary outcome which is not...
Very
which
good.
Can happen or cannot happen.
Hence the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Echad shoygeg ve'echad mezid b'chilul Hashem.
Ah.
The mens rea, if you're a lawyer, right? Which now you understand why I said almost the exact opposite of what you said.
But
Allow me
so
to.
counterintuitive.
It is very. So let's explain.
Okay.
And that's why I'm deviating a little bit from our topic now. I hadn't intended saying any of this, but that's one of the beauties of teaching. As you and interacting, then you feel forced to clarify. Let me stop here for a second, and let me to explain this. Let me tell you a beautiful thought from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. That's how. And it's also a quasi-halachic topic. There is a very sensitive topic, which happened in the Middle Ages a lot, and sometimes occasionally does happen, tragically, and that is when there's a shmad, and let's say a family in the Middle Ages, or any time theoretically, is given the choice, convert or be put to death. O Yehudi o Tzaluv, famous formulation of the Ramban. Yes, either to be crucified or be a Jew, become a Christian, or a Yehudi. And this is, tragically the situation that faced. Now, the Balei HaTosfos were faced with this very much. And they, sorry?
They said yes, and the Rambam said no.
Well, so the Balei HaTosfos took the view. Now, here's the question. De facto, practice was that the Hasidim in Ashkenaz, throughout the Middle Ages, would give their entire families up to be killed rather than be baptized, rather than go and be... Now, this is one thing if you are a overbearing bas mitzvah, but the question is, what about those who gave up their young boys and girls who are under baron bas mitzvah? Where's the legitimacy in that? What right do you have? What is the halachic license? The Balei HaTosfos asked this as a question. And there's other stuff which I can tell you, but off camera. It's a really, really interesting topic.
I read there was a big difference in this view between the Ashkenaz world and Chachmei Sfard, especially
Correct.
where they were very against.
Correct. Correct. It's not a topic I want to go into in detail, but just to be aware of it. But I want to try and keep it on the. You're right. You are absolutely right. But here's the question. The question is, are we retrofitting it or not? Is a good question. But the Balei Tosfos asks this. I think it's in Parshas Vayishlach. I'll find you the Marmokim. What's the heter? Assuming there is a heter, that this is what families did. What right do you have? Your little child has no mitzvah of v'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. The chiyuv to give yourself up rather than, is that not murder? Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky points out the following, very brilliantly, and it just gives us I'm not even saying this halachically. The Rambam, when he brings the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, I hadn't intended saying this, so I think it's Perek Ches of Yesodei HaTorah, if I'm not mistaken. He says, Hakeil Hagodol, he uses quite an honorific at the beginning of the Perek. He says, there is mitzvah al kol beis Yisrael. Uses a very interesting lashon. There's a mitzvah on beis Yisrael to be mekadesh shem shamayim. Very unusual language. Mitzvah on beis Yisrael. The Rambam, as a halachist, says, it's an ish or an isha is chayev or not. He says beis Yisrael. V'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. Right? Says the Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, brilliant. Look at the way that this is, the language, the way that it's couched. Usually you would expect, this is an imperative, this is a mitzvah. You must, you should. What's v'nikdashti? It's in the passive voice. And I will be sanctified. V'nikdashti, and I will be sanctified. It's in the passive. Nifal. You would expect it to be in the imperative. You shall, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, a very important one, right? We hope we never need to do it, but it can happen. Yes, when there's b'soich b'nei Yisrael, you have a chiyuv to give up your life for any aveira. If it's the kavana is for you to you to be over al das, says Rabbi Kamenetsky, because chilul Hashem and kiddush Hashem is measured by outcome, not by intention. A child has no intention. There has no kavana. There's no kavana. It's not mechuyev. But there's one mitzvah. So here, if this was some sort of Talmudic pub quiz question kind of thing, yes, it would be, can you think of a mitzvah min haTorah that a child under the age of bar and bas mitzvah potentially might be obligated in? And this might be an answer. Kiddush Hashem. Wir sind ein Botschaft. We as a nation and individually. V'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. Chilul Hashem, and here I'll give you the cherry on the cake, is the Gemara. Heichi dami chilul Hashem, says the Gemara. The Gemara says, what do you mean? Give me an example of chilul Hashem. I think it's Rav, if I'm not mistaken, who says, I go to the butcher, famous Gemara, and I have an account with the butcher, and I'm a Rav, everybody knows Rav, I'm a Rav. He goes into the butcher, he takes some steaks, and he walks out. He's got an account with the butcher. He's done nothing wrong. He has credit. But it doesn't look good. Could be Rav is chayav misa. He's done nothing wrong. He's done no aveira whatsoever. But there's a chilul Hashem, and then potentially it's chayav misa. Do you realize? I'm not paskening here. I'm drawing your attention to the unique nature, the imperative. We are here, shakol bara l'chvoidai. That's why we exist. And therefore, the chilul Hashem and kiddush Hashem aspect is we as a nation and as individuals. And the more, kagoy nano, Rav says, for another person who do the very same thing, no big deal. You see the rabbi, the Ben Torah, the Rabbiner seminar student, wasn't in Shachris, whatever. Whatever. No, it's just...
We have a cheshbon there for our Sunday snack.
What's that?
And I don't pay with cash, I just say the name. I might have to check that.
No. There is a serious point here. So, there is a serious point. Back to our sugya, the emes is, I had not intended saying any of that. It was a bit unscripted. But it's a fascinating topic. It's a really important topic.
One small,
Yeah.
So, first point is, if you say that the Kiddush Hashem functions in that way, as Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky said, or as he explained, if you would assume that, then I'm saying, it sounds good, but I'm saying the term of obligate in the mitzvah of is then not really understandable, because something which is an obligation has to do with
It means, it's very simple, Abby. We have to walk around constantly cognizant of the fact that of what we represent, and if you think about it, if we all really genuinely felt, especially in a place like this, and that shakol bara lechoidoi, that is the purpose of the bria, and we represent Hashem. I'm wearing a kippah. I look vaguely Jewish. I am identifiably Jewish. That creates an incredible obligation to behave. So yes, so it does create an imperative.
I'm just asking on the Kiddush Hashem of dying for, in the sense of,
Yes.
that is the point where I was like, okay, so from that we must then infer that when someone, Shalom, is getting killed by a terrorist,
Yes.
a Jew is getting killed by a terrorist,
Yeah.
and he did the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem.
Very good. You're raising now a fascinating point. I don't want to go into it again, but I have to accept your point as a corollary, and this is another. Those that died because they were Jewish, they were killed just because they were Jewish. Therefore, the fact that they may have been secular, the fact that they had no kavana,
no plan,
no plan, but the fact that the fact that the world looks around and says these people were killed because they were Jewish, there's something going on over here, kind of thing. If as a result of that there is a Kiddush Hashem, then irrespective of anything else, yes, those it's very clear in to some extent in halacha, but certainly more in Kabbalah as well, that those that die are killed because they are Jewish. There is a bit of a tikkun they need to go through. I hesitate to say this on camera, but in eternal terms, we don't wish it on ourselves, on anybody, God forbid, of course. But in terms of the panorama, the sweep of nitzchias of eternity, perhaps, dare I say it otherwise, they would have just been almost quite literally, and not just symbolically, but literally the empty seats at the Shabbos table. And now they're in Gan Eden. In the highest possible place, we are told, with the Harugei Lud.
What do you mean by that? I'm not sure
I don't want to be more explicit, certainly on camera. But think about if somebody is killed because they were Jewish, and if that is to be considered a Kiddush Hashem, because you've got to take the smooth with the rough, then despite anything else you may or may not have done in your life, you have attained. If Chilul Hashem is the worst Iveri, then a Kiddush Hashem is the biggest mitzvah. And thus, if that person is deemed to have died al Kiddush Hashem, then although they may have to undergo a minor tikkun of some sort for the Averas they did in their lives, but there's a fast track, and they end up in a place, which the Gemara talks about in terms of Harugei Lud, those who are die al Kiddush Hashem, which is in a very, very high and incredible place. Therefore, had they not, who knows where, you with me? I don't want to say more than that for reasons of sensitivity, but that is the Torah way to look at it. Okay, of course, weiter. So, that's Abaya. Now, here's my point. Esther was Karka Olam. Remember, the question of the Gemara was, we're talking about here about Kiddush Hashem. That's the context. We're going to see Tosfos in a minute, who will ask, whoa, slow down, forget Kiddush Hashem. What about Giloi Aroyos? But the Gemara clearly is not discussing Giloi Aroyos. The Gemara, this sugya here in Sanhedrin, is focused on one thing and one thing only, and that is Chilul Hashem and Kiddush Hashem. And that the Gemara says, but Esther Parhesia Havoi, the story of Esther was in public, and therefore, says Rashi, she should have let herself get killed from the perspective of Kiddush Hashem. Answers Abaya, she was Karka Olam. So she didn't do anything, she's passive. I'm asking a question on the basis of all this other stuff I've just said to you. So what? She was passive. If this is a challenge against what I've said before, that's what I was raising. You with me? But the Gemara understood, Abaya understood, the fact that she's Karka Olam, she is not mechuyev to let herself be killed. From the Kiddush Hashem, the mitzvah v'nikdashti, Doesn't apply because she is not doing anything. You are not allowed to do something. Whatever it is, you can't do something which will result in a Kiddush Hashem, in a Chilul Hashem. But she is not doing anything. That is Abaya's focus and emphasis.
No, I understand the slow that Abaya wants to make, I think, but I don't understand where he gets it from. If we see and read the passage we read at the beginning where it said Asher loy kadas kasher ovadati ovadati, and it clearly states that there's an act.
Good. Very good. Very good. I thought you were asking something else. I thought what you were asking, and the question that is, and I think what you are asking is, she walked into the king's palace knowing that he was then going to be intimate with her. Of course, at the moment of intimacy,
doing what's done,
yeah.
And she knows.
So that's your question, right? So your question is, so it is, your kasha is as follows. You're saying it is true that at the moment of physical intimacy, at that moment she is passive and she's not required for the act other than to be there, but she walked in for the purposes of that. Yeah. Why is that not a Maisa? Very good. That we're going to see. The Rishonim talk about this, the Achronim talk about this, but the Abaya, he knew that as well. Abaya nonetheless considered it Karka Olam. And therefore, there's no chiyuv of Kiddush Hashem. She didn't have to give herself up. She didn't have to allow herself to be killed. Rava gives another answer. Rava or mahanoas atzmon shori. No. So Rava doesn't agree with Abaya. So maybe he's with you. That's not either because that's not considered passive, or being passive isn't. There's two ways we could understand Rava. Hadn't really intended going into this, but think about it from it logically. You could either say Rava is saying, yes, she's Karka Olam, but I don't care because it doesn't let you off the hook with Chilul Hashem and Kiddush Hashem, which is judged by outcome and not by intent, possibly. Or you could say, like you're saying, that she's not Karka Olam because she went in, she put herself forward. That's not called being Karka Olam. So what, that when it comes to the actual act that she's passive, that doesn't help you. Either way, Rava therefore rejects Abaya's svara and gives his own answer. Rava Omar Hanoas Atzmon Shari. Hanoas Atzmon. Their own pleasure is different. What on earth? Says Rashi. She'ein hanochri miskavein laha'aviroi meirasai. Here you see Gabi say it very clearly. The purpose of the nochri is not, he doesn't care, Judaism, Shmudism, Buddhism, he needs to scratch an itch. All he wants is his own carnal pleasure. There is no Chilul Hashem here. Beautiful Rashi. There's no Chilul Hashem. When this Gentile, whoever he may be, wants to have his way with this woman, God, religion has got nothing to do with it. He's just he's got a desire, and that's it. There's no more nobody will impute any significance to this act other than he's a behavior. He wants to do what he wants to do. He has a desire. There's no more significance. Therefore, there is no Chilul Hashem. So, to be lomdish again for a second, we would say Abaya accepts the validity of the question, but proposes an answer. Why? For a technical reason. The Chilul Hashem that will emanate does not necessitate and require her to let herself be killed. And Rava rejects the premise of the question and says there is no Chilul Hashem. Did you hear that? That's really what's going on over here. And tomorrow, Mi'etz Hashem, we will start the Tosfos. And here's where the fun begins. Yes?
Does this have to be differentiated or seen in a different light than the Maisa and Ksubos, where we say about the imperator, where the wife...
That's what we're going to see. That's exactly what we're going to see. The Tosfos is in both places and similar.
Because you said that it's just his hana'ah. There's no aspect of